Hi, Nidhi. I'm so excited that you're on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Michelle. I'm so looking forward to this conversation.
Well, congratulations on your book. Your Body Already Knows. What a beautiful title. It already invokes so much, but I'm just curious, what prompted you to want to write this and write it now?
Yeah, so I think it's twofold. I think one of the main things is that I started believing, and the more I practice Ayurveda, right, studying from the ancient texts and the medical world, the more I have started believing that we know what we're supposed to eat, how we're supposed to live to be healthy. And when I look at the world around me, I've seen, we see animals like the deer does not wake up in the morning saying, "Oh my God, I have to eat plants again today. I wish I could eat something else." And the tiger doesn't get carried away saying, "Oh my God, somebody talks about 5 a.m. benefits. I'm going to wake up tomorrow morning." I mean, all species on the planet understand what they need for their wellness, and we do too. But we've gone so far away from our instinct and closer to our intellect. What made us human is now also becoming the primary reason for our parents. So, and as I continue to practice Ayurveda as a doctor, what I also realized, so that's the first reason, right? Because I believe that our body already knows. And the second reason is, as I practice Ayurveda, which is the science of life, and I realized that the practice of Ayurveda itself is becoming very academic, prescriptive, and dogmatic. So instead of understanding the science of life and its beautiful patterns, and how things emerge, change, transform, we've started just giving people prescriptions saying they take these herbs, eat this food, but now they're just natural. So you feel a little bit better about it. But at the same time, you're setting people up for dependency and despair, where they may feel better in their bodies, but they don't know anything more about their bodies. So I said, really, if we have to solve this health crisis, we need to go back to what we already know. And that's what drove me to write the book.
I love it so much. And it's so clear that it's like this generous offering that you've taken everything that you've learned and know and just distilled it in a way with your 21-day plan and the way that people can implement it and then take ownership back. Because I love what you said. It's so true because whether you go to a traditional doctor or an Ayurveda practitioner, right, there's prescriptions. And so it's almost like handing your power away and you're saying, no, no, I'll give you the roadmap and you're going to reclaim that for yourself. Yes.
Exactly. I couldn't have said it better. Michelle, you described my book perfectly. Yes, yes,
Well,
yes.
that's what I distilled from what you wrote.
Exactly.
Yeah, and
Yes,
I love what you
absolutely.
said about, and I'm sorry. So I say we say Ayurveda because we don't. So I want to hear you say the word
So, so Ayurvedic is not really a word, but of course, when we translate it into English, it becomes Ayurvedic. But the actual word is Ayurveda.
Ayurveda. Okay,
Yeah.
and you
And there's an
wrote
emphasis on the R and the emphasis on the D. So it's like Ayurveda, you know?
Ayurveda. I know, and we're saying it. I'm first generation American on my mom's side, so there's certain words that we say right in the States
Yes.
that like tahini versus tahina. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or like hummus,
Yes.
right? Okay. So
Yes.
like there's
Yes.
but
Which is
you just go
completely
with it.
fine. Which
Yeah,
is
you
complete.
just
Yeah,
go
you
with it
just
because
go
it
with it.
makes it accessible and it's such a
Yeah.
powerful modality that it's so beautiful. 5,000-year old ancient system, but you say it's the language of your upbringing. So just let's go a little bit deeper into somebody's like, wait, what is this? You say it covers so many different things from disease. I know it can even, like some of your clients you talked about not only got healthier, but changed their careers. Like it impacts all aspects of life. So it's so profound.
It's beautiful, right? Because it literally translates into the science of life. Ayu means life, and Veda means science. And
Ah,
anything that life covers, right? Which is yes, your physical health, yes, your emotional health, but there it goes into extreme detail about topics like social conduct, who do you be friends with, emotional regulation, seasons, treatment protocols, fertility. I mean, there is so much about fertility. I think more than out there. If you did a fertility program or a PhD, it's there's more about. So everything that has to do with life
mm,
at any aspect is there's a detailed understanding and a detailed explanation of all of that. So there's a large scope, right? Because it really
yes.
understands the science of life. And when I say it was the language of my upbringing, Michelle, because I grew up in a family where my grandfather was an Ayurvedic healer and he started this lineage for us. But I did not learn Ayurveda as it was like a particular science. It was just the science, which meant that For example, things like, hey, are you sure you want to eat that at night because it's heavy, or because it's already night? Will you be able to digest that? So even a simple question like, will you be able to digest that because it's already night, has given me three pieces of information. A, that oh, I cannot like nighttime is a heavy time to digest things. B, that this food is probably heavy, and see maybe something about my own constitution, if somebody else is eating it. So I did not learn Ayurveda with formal declarations like, according to Ayurveda, you should not eat yogurt at night. According to Ayurveda, there's no such thing. We
Yeah.
were taught Ayurveda, a family of 14 people. I grew up with seven children in the household. And we were taught Ayurveda with just like understanding, connecting with what's happening outside and thus connecting with what's happening inside. And it was a beautiful way to learn how to live.
It
It
is
just brought
so
freedom. It didn't
beautiful.
bring any fear. It just brought
Yes.
tremendous amount of freedom rather than bringing any fear, which when I moved to the US 20 years ago, I was alarmed to see that health here was primarily driven by fear. And it was not a value system. It was just like, it was a threat.
This is so good. Absolutely. And part of what you're learning when you're hearing that too is that food is nourishment. Food has a place. Food serves a certain purpose. Like I grew up hearing my mom say they're like, "Oh no, no, you don't combine those foods or
Mm,
that doesn't go together." I've never heard any of my friends like parents say they put a lot of stuff together that my mom would be like, "No, no, that won't sit well." You know what I mean? It's like so
which is
interesting.
brilliant. You know why, Michelle? Because
Why?
Ayurveda, maybe it was called Ayurveda in India, but
Yeah.
every ancient culture that knew a thing or two about wellness and the rhythms of the universe have the same exact principles.
I
I've looked
got
at all
goosebumps.
diets.
That's so good.
I love it that your mom said that, right? Because Ayurveda will tell you, and I'm pretty sure most of the combinations are exactly what what we know to be core combinations because it's the science of life. It cannot be different in a different part of the world. It's universal.
This is so good. I didn't expect that. This is so good. Can I just note that you wrote the dedication, you wrote thank you, Bapuji, my grandfather for leaving footprints in the sand. So let's just talk a little bit about the impact that he had on you.
This is such a this gets it always gets emotional for me every single day. But Michelle, he grew up, uh, of course, Ayurvedically, so he knew all of this wisdom. He was a Sanskrit scholar, and he lived like a saint. He lost his wife very early,
Mm.
and he had to raise three boys, who were quite. He had to raise six children, but the three daughters were much older, and then three young boys. And he could have just become, very aggressive, hands-on about it, or he could have just surrendered into into what life had to offer. And he chose to surrender. And he chose to create the safe space for self-growth more than let me create opportunities for you. Let me create something outside for you. Let me do this with fear. He was just like, I'm going to surrender and I'm going to teach my children that it's really about undoing yourself. This
Mm.
opportunity of being a human being is about undoing yourself. And then my father and his brothers went on to do extremely well in the world outside, but they always kept that grounding, that seed that was planted,
Mm.
and they gave it to all of us, all the children in the house. But for me, just watching my grandfather, we slept in the same room. There was like a big family bed for all the children. And then my grandfather had his own bed in the same room. And just seeing the way he lived his life with so much quiet, non-imposing, just inspiring, never imposing. He taught us how to just inspire and how to just keep on doing yourself day after day after day after day. And it was just such an incredible school for me. I think it was the biggest part of my education, what I received, is to just watch the way he conducted himself with compassion, with these Ayurvedic principles, but with just more than that, just as a human being, how he lived. So I think of him every day. I lost him about 15 years ago,
I'm sorry.
but I think of him almost every day.
Well, he's impacting the work you're doing. And you know, it's so beautiful what you said about him just sort of doing that, like the undoing is, it's literally how you've approached this book. You're handing it over versus like being, like too prescriptive. And so it's truly a gift. It's like his legacy continues through your work. So it's really
Thank you so
beautiful.
much, Michelle. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, it's so beautiful. And I also love the idea of just the community you grew up with, because that's another piece of like the healing puzzle that's so missing in our sort of modern society, especially here in the United States.
Absolutely. I think it's the first time, and I think we're the only, firstly, it's the first time in history that we've become so individualistic
Yes.
and the self has become greater than the collective. And it's not that we're any happier, right, Michelle? I mean, I would say if we were following and pursuing this path and it made us happier and we were all just happier beings, but we all know that chronic disease is on the rise and that mental health conditions are on the rise. So physically and emotionally, we're not happy. And at the same time, we're the only species on this planet that gives more importance to self than the collective.
Yes.
Every other species really seeks to have that symbiotic relationship with its ecosystem. And, this lack of resentment. I mean, sometimes I'm like, there'll be a freak snow and it'll ruin spring. And yet that tree and plant or flower will blossom again. It'll just come back to birth. And the cycle
Mhm.
just continues and it just creates this beauty on our planet. So I think we've gone too far, I think personally. And I'm so grateful that some of us are still left with at least a history where we experience
Yes.
what it feels like to live in a community.
Absolutely. And the beauty of that, and having, like, my grandmother was always around, having the elders like sort of close by all the time. I saw my grandmother every single day. So there's such richness in all of that. Let's talk about, so it's interesting because I think you trademarked this. You have a program called Inner Climate Method, and you also in your book talk about the significance of our inner climate. So explain to us what it is and how understanding it can help us optimize our health.
Yeah, absolutely. So, right, Michelle, the whole idea is that anything in life, like any species, any plant, uh, any organism requires a certain ecosystem to thrive. For example, you cannot take tomatoes and plant a seed in Alaska and say, "Oh, I'm going to plant this tomato because the climate is not right." Right. At the same
Interesting.
time, life only exists on our planet because the climate was right. No other planet in the solar system, the entire Milky Way, we've not found any life at least because the climate was wrong. So here we know this for sure, all of us, you, me, everybody, that 4.5 billion years ago, life began as a single cell organism, right? Like, and then
Mm.
now, and without much effort, right? Like life just continued to grow, evolve, and thrive till about, I would say, 200 years ago, till global warming started to take over. So the climate was right and life would thrive. The climate shifted and now there's our own life on this planet has become a threat. Like, can we live here anymore? So this is it's a principle of science. Climate is right, life will thrive. Similarly, our body is houses trillions of microorganisms.
Mm.
And for those microorganisms, our body is the universe, the inside of our body. Now we know that this microbiome is responsible for almost everything from we started with recognizing our gut, hormones, mental health, the entire nervous system, even brain health, they're realizing. Even your brain has all of this climate of the microbiome. Your colon has microbiome, your vagina has microbiome. So everything in your body is now dictated by this army of organisms. And
Mm.
just like everything else on the planet, they also need a certain climate to thrive. So the idea is, what is that climate? I mean, we call it homeostasis, which really explains nothing. Most of us know what homeostasis is. When we go for an exam and we look at numbers and a range, half of the jargon we can't speak or understand. But it's really an experience. It's a climate. So
Yes.
the idea is that through Ayurvedic connection, I understood that there is an optimum place where this life thrives, and our just job is to go back to that climate. So what is that climate, right, Michelle? And that climate is, I tell people to do this, and I'm going to ask you to do this. Take your palm and just cup your palm and just blow into your hand a few times. What does that feel like? A cold, hot, warm,
Warm, hot, warm,
warm.
warm.
Yeah, warm. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's
My hand's hot because I'm holding my tea.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's
Yes.
basically warm, right? So our breath
Yes.
is warm and it's
Yes.
moist, right? It's not dry, it's
Yes.
moist.
Correct.
Our blood is warm and moist. And the mother's milk, which really creates life and allows the baby to grow, is warm and moist. Your reproductive fluids are warm and moist.
Yes.
Also, the microcosmos, which is our body, mimics the macrocosmos, which means the world outside. As is the macro, such is the
Beautiful.
micro. A lot of
Yes.
philosophers have said it. It's the basic underlying principle of Ayurveda is as as above, so below. Anyways, outside, where does life thrive? Florida in March. beautiful, like warm and moist. If it's hot
Yes.
and humid, you become Amazon rainforest parasites. If it's cold and dry, you got cold and dry desert. Cold and humid, you're Alaska. You're hot and dry, you grow cacti. So warm and moist is outside. Similarly, our probiotic environment, which was previously known as flora and fauna, when they first discovered it, they said, oh, this is the flora and fauna inside our system. Flora and fauna does exist in warm and moist places, right? So the ideal climate is warm and moist inside our body. And I'll go a little bit further into what that means, okay? But I want to also take this into our mind and emotions because it
Yes.
extends to all bodies. And there are few bodies. We have a physical body, we have an emotional body, we have a mental body, we have a spiritual body, all of it. But even in our emotional body, right? Who are we attracted to? We are attracted to people who are warm. We don't like hot-tempered people. We don't like cold people. Those relationships go warm people, and nobody ever teaches us what that warmth means. Like most of our
Mm.
comfort foods, soups, broths, they're all comfort. We love a hug, so warm and moist. You love a cozy blanket. It's so warm
Yes.
and moist. If you're sitting in a room, you're every 68 degrees is where everybody feels comfortable, which is like nice and relatively warm. But also, you don't want your hands or your body to be extremely sticky or to be dry. That's why the term moisturizer, because we just feel right in that moisture. It's where the sun comes and dehydrates and heats up the planet, and the moon comes and brings back that moisture. It's the
Beautiful.
exact balance of that sun and moon, which is warm and moist. Anger, well, just it's a little bit further and then we'll stop. But anger is a hot emotion. Stress is a hot and dry emotion. Depression is like a humid, sluggish emotion. But love, gratitude, compassion, so warm and moist. So the idea is that yes, we've deviated from this warm and moist. We've become stressed, hot and dry. We are
Yes.
eating really hot, so we're just working, working, working. We're not resting enough. Caffeine, alcohol. We call them dehydrating foods. Uh,
True.
extreme amounts of spicy foods, but also just overall the way we live and we conduct ourselves, right? So people have ulcerative colitis, IBS, all hormonal imbalance because we've become so solar. We're doing the hot and dry a lot more.
Hmm.
Or this part, so it's like inflammation, right? We call it inflammation in the body. It creates inflammation.
Yeah.
Global warming outside, inflammation inside. I'm not surprised. It's the same thing, right? What global warming is doing
Interesting.
and inflammation. At the same time, I mean, there's another set of population like that's become too like sluggish, dense, overnourishment, overeating. So not doing enough, too lunar, as I call it in my language, right?
Hmm.
Just not doing enough. And so you see that overbuilt, so dense and sluggish. So we need to find our way back into that warm and moist, into that whole sense of balance. So I teach people how to do this in their diets, in their exercise, in their relationships, in how
Hmm.
they sleep, how they basically overall look at life, but also to get into their own inner climate, right? Because yours could be different from mine depending on firstly, how you were born, what your genetics are, but also the consumption choices you've made,
Hmm.
lifestyle consumption and food consumption, both. So I tell people, let's start at trying to identify where your inner climate is, and then let's make our way back to warm and moist. But warm and moist is optimal. And sometimes when people cannot identify their inner climate, and it's hard, I say, that's fine. We'll just start at living this warm and moist lifestyle. And it's super easy. It's actually very, very easy to live that warm and moist. It just simplifies everything. In the work that I do and our women that I work with, they're like, this was the biggest game changer. This is so simple. Why didn't I know to do this? So we just come back to that regulation, that warm and moist, and that is the optimal inner climate.
Okay. I love this so much. And I love how you just talked about the sun and the moon and the warm and the moist. Like all these connections, like it's all connected and we're just but we're disconnected from it, which is part of the problem. Um, the doshas, you have a different, like, are you thinking about that stuff wrong? Is
Yeah,
it, I want to, so clarify that for us, because I think that's important.
very, very important, right? So our body has three doshas, right? Everybody has three doshas. Kapha is what creates density and humidity in the body. Like it builds the cytoplasm, your synovial fluids, all liquid mucosal lining. So these are, if you think about all of this, mucosal lining, your synovial fluids, your saliva, these are all protective juices of the body and they allow the cytoplasm, allow building to happen. So kapha is responsible for building. All cold, humid elements are kapha elements in the
Mm,
body.
okay.
That's the first dosha, right? And they're allowed to build. because you need things. If the things are too hot, they will not build, right? They'll get into like just breakdown. So
Right.
there are all these. Then pitta dosha, which is very important because you can't just keep building, you have to transform, right? Because we have this mitochondria, body is a living organism functioning. So all warm, so not really warm, hot and humid elements, right? Like your bile, your digestive enzymes, your reproductive fluids, they have this heat in them.
Mm.
They have this warmth in them, and because they allow for transformation to happen, the
Wow.
mitochondria of your cells. So pitta allows for transformation.
Okay.
And vata, which is the last dosha, allows for movement of substances, right? Which means because your blood goes up to your head. I mean, you don't have to go into a headstand to do it. And so it allows for movement of substances, thoughts. Everywhere there's movement, there's vata. Even your hands, you move them because of the force of vata. But vata is also very strong in the pelvis, and that vata is used for evacuation.
Ah.
So elimination of the baby, defecation, labor delivery, urination, having a menstrual cycle.
Oh, wow.
Um, a lot of times people actually, even, when they take their last breath, several times they will actually urinate because that's where life also leaves the body. So
This is so deep.
basically,
You have such a beautiful way of explaining this stuff. I'm sorry. It's just so
thank
beautiful.
you.
Okay, I didn't mean to
Thank you,
interrupt.
Michelle.
Please keep going.
No,
It's so
thank you.
good.
So we have all three doshas, right? Kapha builds, kapha is cold, humid, dense, builds, pitta, hot, transforms, and vata is cool and dry. It moves like the wind.
Mm.
It's just the wind, force of wind, cool and dry, and it depletes and movement and depletion.
Yes.
However, however, people say, what dosha are you? What this
Right.
simply means is
Yes.
that what tendency does your body have? Ideally, you should be building and transforming appropriately, and the movement and the decline should also happen appropriately. But the dominance of a dosha means that your body has the tendency to exaggerate one of these, which means if you're kapha dominant, your body likes to build more, which means you have more tissue, you may have thicker hair, you may also gather more plaque and cholesterol in your arteries. You
Mm.
may be so you have an overnourished, you may be more sluggish, more sedentary because your body is just like to building rather than moving into the next phases. People who are pitta dominant and and their bodies like to transform, they could be hot. They are always thinking on their mind, very focused. They could tend to be angry because pitta is hot, right?
Mm.
Their digestive systems, the symptoms could be like hot, acidic, burning in their stools, quick digestion, multiple bowel movements. Everything is hot. They
Wow.
could get skin rash, sensitivity to the sun, pitta dominance. And vata dominance could be like the wind. Too much anxiety, thoughts are all over. Skin is dry because the skin has dried you inside. You're bloating because that wind is inside. Too very depleted. Your food cannot really build good quality tissue. Also, maybe scatterbrain, right? So that is what doshic imbalance means, that your body is not building, transforming, and doing its movement and depreciation at an appropriate rate. And depending on that, you can identify with the dosha. But really, that's jargon, right, Michelle? That's only when you get
Mm.
interested in Ayurveda. What I found is that if all the texts talk about the fact that if these three doshas are in balance, you're in this great space of health and nobody can take away your health except for age eventually. But nothing else can steal your health, and you can just go through any storm, any disease, and you'll be fine, right? You can be exposed to anything and you'll be fine. And you can eat anything and you'll be fine. So, what is that climate, right? Because if kapha is cold and pitta is hot, and vata is dry, what I found, even through a numerical formula, that
Mm.
the only climate where none of them are out of balance, is this place of warm and moist.
Wow. So that's the goal. This is like the heart of your book, too. I mean, that's what
It's not
I,
a Bible.
yes.
It's exactly where the three doshas are in perfect harmony. And somehow the Ayurvedic literature, which I suspect has been, 60% of our literature is destroyed.
Oh,
So I
wow.
suspect that this was actually spelled out somewhere, because now none of the books spell it out like this. But once you know this and you go back to the ancient texts, you almost read it between each line. You're like, every recommendation and that everything just, it's bringing you back to the warm and moist. So I like people to understand their bodies as a climate rather than a dosha. Like there are people
Mm.
who feel that excess density and coldness and humidity and sluggishness, who feel like they're just overbuilding I like people to understand whether they're hot and dry, super intense, dehydrated, just burnt out. So I like to give that understanding because people then once you relate to it that way,
Yes.
or you automatically can move towards your antidotes in a much more simple manner.
Absolutely. It's so much more attainable and like relatable. It just makes a lot of sense to me. Circadian rhythm. We were talking before the mics went on. It seems like everyone wants to talk about it, but you have a whole chapter on this and I loved it so much. Can we dive into circadian rhythm? What is it? Why is it important? And how do we work with our circadian rhythms to optimize the health and create this warm and moist environment?
Yeah, and it's fascinating, right? Because I mean, of course, Ayurveda talked about it 5,000 years ago in great detail, way beyond what we have today in the modern science world.
Wow.
And I do believe that all cultures understood it. Anybody who understood a thing or two, like I said, about wellness. So the idea is that, anyways, 200 years prior to our time, Michelle, when there was no
Yeah.
electricity, we
Yes.
lived according to the circadian rhythms. So there was no real need to have this conversation. I mean, we didn't have
Interesting.
jet. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, because, I mean, I completely doubt that our ancestors were sitting with lamps at
They didn't
night.
have these, thank goodness for them.
Yeah,
Lucky them.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
no
And they're like,
phones.
and they're not laying out big dinner tables with lanterns and saying, "Oh, I'm just nocturnal, so I'm just going to stargaze all night, every night." And they
No,
didn't do that. I mean, it was dark. They found a
they
way to
went
go
to
to sleep
sleep. Yeah.
soon enough, right? So anyway, so there's six phases in the day, and I'd like to talk about each one of them very, very briefly. And now, modern science, has shown, I've done tremendous amounts of research on this, that there are certain neurotransmitters that have their ebb and flow in these different phases of the day. So
Mm,
certain activities are more, they're more suited to you doing certain activities, eating certain foods. Right. But let's talk about what those six phases are. And I don't want anyone who's listening to this to remember them as a prescription from me. But I always like to teach with let's relate it to the world outside because it's this entire science is built on as is the macro, such as the micro. Let's like start there, right?
yeah.
So, firstly, we're diurnal mammals. We're not nocturnal. We're not bats. We're not leopards. We wake up with the sun and we sleep when the sun sets because
Right.
our night we don't have nighttime vision. So that's how we know we're diurnal. So, what's happening outside in the morning, 6 to 10 a.m.? So, the
Yeah.
morning time is wet and sluggish outside, and it's
Yes.
also wet and sluggish inside your body.
Mm,
Why? Don't believe me, right? But if you look at your own body, you see that people who are prone to congestion, nasal congestion, it's the most in the morning, right? So your
yes.
nasal congestion, eye boogers. If you're trying to show off in a yoga class your flexibility, that's not the time because your joints are more padded and they're thicker in the morning. So your
Yes.
body is as sluggish, right? So the morning
Okay.
hours between 6 and 10 sluggish outside, wet and sluggish inside. Best time to start firing it up slowly, which means it's the best time for exercise. And it's the best time to eat after exercise a light, warm breakfast. Fruits are too cold and sluggish. It just, I mean, it's appalling to Ayurvedic doctors that people would think that fruit is a good replacement for other kinds of breakfast. So no fruit, no cold smoothies, no protein shakes. Of course, if you're going to drink a smoothie, it's going to kill your appetite, that wet and sluggish inside your wet and sluggish gut. And then people are like, oh my God, I had this smoothie for 200, it only had 200 calories, and now I don't need to eat anything more. How healthy? Of course, you're not going to eat anything more because you're shutting off that fire before it could burn. So
Makes sense.
morning and all blue zones, by the way, if you look at all the blue zones and all their breakfast, they eat this way, right,
Yes.
Michelle? So you exercise, you eat a small, light, warm breakfast. Always, I say spiced, not spicy, but spiced.
Yes.
Um, Between 10 and 2, the sun peaks. The heat peaks outside, the heat peaks inside.
Mm,
That's why most collaborative work, everybody wants to get the chunk of their work done between those hours, 10 and 2. It is also when you have the largest appetite, your gastric juices. There's gastrin, your insulin sensitivity is at its highest. Your body is ready to eat its biggest meal. Even the plants don't dare do photosynthesis without this sun. So we think we're so cool we can digest our food later, but this is where I say indulge, eat what you want. Your body has the fire, it's going to burn it. So,
okay.
biggest meal of the day is your lunch. And we can talk about why breakfast shouldn't be the biggest later. But then what happens between 2 and 4? Sorry, 2 and 6. Let's look at what happens outside. It gets windy, right? As the sun begins to dwindle, it becomes windy outside. It also becomes windy in the body. That's why usually at 3:34, people are like trying to stretch at their desk, taking that wind out of their joints, yawning, wanting to get a second, like a second whiff of energy through their caffeine, whatever that is, right? So 4 o'clock, your body is meant to, like in that period between 2 and 6, it's meant to start slowing down. It's meant
Yes.
to start setting. It gets windy, it gets drier and more depleted. So ideally between 2 and 6, I tell people if you need to work, do the easiest part of your work. Check your emails, schedule something that you enjoy. Allow your body to not be super engaged between
Mm.
those hours. And then as you hit 6 o'clock, Michelle, 6 o'clock is when, let's just say I'm giving 12 and 12 daytime, nighttime.
Yeah.
If it's
Yeah.
in that. 6 o'clock is when the sun sets. Your last meal, a small meal of the day, the smallest meal is dinner. And that's everything. You eat that smallest supper, you eat your soup, whatever it is, and then you call it a day. From 6 to 10, you only unwind. It's all unwinding and unwinding and unwinding. No digestion. Once in a while, you want to eat a small snack, you want to do something, that's fine. But as much as possible, no food. And 10 o'clock, again, that nighttime repair begins, 10 p.m. at night. And if you can follow these clocks, you're gold, by the way. But 10 p.m. To 2 a.m. in the morning, your body has this beautiful metabolic repair happening at the deepest levels of the tissues, provided it's not working on the nighttime digestion food. There's no food in the gut because that repair starts within. And now it's beautiful that science has proven it, that there's a glymphatic system that kind of comes into action. Not lymphatic, which basically cleans out the debris. We have debris in our nervous system that can be seen under a microscope that occurs as a result of thinking. It cleans out
Yes.
the debris, it creates cellular repair, your growth hormone takes a surge, your prolactin rises, new cells are generated, all between 10 and 2. And then at 2 o'clock, a lot of times people wake up suddenly feeling hot, wanting to urinate, they suddenly break up in a sweat.
True.
That's usually the end of that cycle, right? And your body wants to sleep deep between 10 and 2. After 2 and 6, now your nervous system is lighter, your body is lighter. So sleeping becomes harder if you wake up in these hours
Yes.
between 2 and 6. If you wake up at 3 o'clock, it's harder to sleep versus waking up at 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock for something. You just wake up because there was a sound. The 2 to 6 is more light. It's the time that your body now goes into REM sleep, longer periods of just in between. And it's a great time because you have access to those subconscious states. So if you're sleeping great, I tell people if you're not sleeping, for whatever reason, yogis woke up at 4:30 to meditate. Right in the middle of this period, yogis woke up to meditate, to learn, to connect with all those magical truths and mysteries of the universe.
Mm.
So I recommend to people chant, do your mantra, meditation, yoga nidra, or just stay in bed till 6 o'clock and let the cycle repeat. And I just want to emphasize how important are these rhythms. Everything is a rhythm, from the vibration of each cell
Mm.
to the rotation of the earth, to the revolution around the sun, to the 4 seasons, to our menstrual cycles, to our breath, to our digestion. Everything has a pattern. And we are smart enough to know that if we experience winter during spring, we are like, oh, that was something freaky. That was a wrong cycle, seasonal cycle. It's the
Yes.
same thing with our body
Yes.
because it's the every micro level as well. So, we know what this random cycles do outside on the planet. They create so much damage. The
Yes.
same thing happens to us. So my idea is not to scare you and tell you overnight, now you change the way you live, but
Yeah.
you want to gradually honor this, be in awe of this beauty of this great orchestra, and know that when you go out of rhythm, it's noise. So just even if you're looking at an orchestra, even if one person goes out of beat, suddenly it's from music, it becomes noise. So that's what happens in your body. No wonder we have all these hormonal hormones are basically clock messengers, the chemical messengers which determine certain clock functions in our body, whether it's your menstrual hormones or morning night hormones, neurotransmitters. So basically, that's why people have all these damaged hormones today because our rhythms are so off. So the
Mm.
idea to just appreciate them first, be in awe of them first, and then bring them to your life.
Oh, I love this so much. And actually, it's interesting you just mentioned with the menstrual cycle and women and the hormones, because I wonder with perimenopause and menopause, what is the lens that you see that with?
Yeah.
How does Ayurveda see this?
So, we talked about kapha, pitta, and vata, right? The building, transformation, and decline. That's
Yes.
everywhere, by the way, right? So those
Yes.
three cycles are everywhere in the universe. Like you get a fruit, or like you grow a fruit in your backyard, you're seeing, oh, it's building, building, building. Then it ripens, it's the transformation phase. And if you don't eat it in the transformation phase, it's going to start decaying. The decline will happen.
Yes.
Even the seasons, right? Spring is a building season. Then summer is where the transformation happens. You have all these fruits. And then autumn and winter is the decay, right?
Okay.
So this happens, even the day has these three phases, right? So the morning time is this building time, everything is wet. Afternoon is transformation, you're actually getting productive work done. And then evening is like the decline of the day. So just how everything is a rhythm, there is even these three doshas which exist in our body, the rhythm is everywhere. Yeah. 0 to 13 is a building phase of our lives, right? So you can eat the same food as a 5-year-old, you don't build the same amount of tissue. You don't grow as rapidly because your body is designed to build between 0 and 13, building
Yes.
phase, kapha
Yes.
phase of life. When you hit adolescence, those hot hormones set in. Transformation phase begins. There's just this long transformation from 13 all the way for women, 45, 50. For men, it's a little bit longer, but let's talk about women right now.
Yes.
So that transformation phase is really what we call our youth. Before we get into our decay, normal part normal part of all cycles on the planet, they happen. But we want to enhance our transformation phase
Yes.
and we want to do it gently. So this is what I tell people, right? We start off at 13 like this oil lamp full of oil, your fuel and your flame, very sharp, very steady. And you will almost see this on a teenager's face, right? Like oily skin, hot hormones. It's like hot and it's like just full of fuel, hot and humid. And then we start to use our fuel, right? We use our fuel, 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 fuel. And I light an oil lamp every day with my daughter. So that's basically the journey of our whole youth. And then what happens when we hit perimenopause? It's like that fuel is depleted. And because I light this oil lamp every day with my daughter, and we notice it when it's going off, as it starts to go off, it becomes very volatile. And that's what happens to women. We burn out our fuel, we become drier. From grapes, we become raisins. And as you start drying, 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 you'll start noticing cracking joints, skin wrinkling, you're losing your collagen, all that moisture. People's
Yeah.
hair become drier because it's that loss of fuel. And as that loss of fuel happens, and towards that last phase, and everybody should experiment at home, because the flame starts to crackle. And we have that same experience, hot flashes. It's so volatile. The flame becomes big, small, so aggressive. And then it goes into its last phase where the flame goes off. And that is the experience of perimenopause and menopause. On the other side, when the flame goes out, it is that, your sweet depreciation begins at that point. But how do we make this journey good? And
Yes.
I tell everybody it's about the preservation of our fuel. And we are having this kind of burnout. Like when the flame is stronger than what the fuel can handle, the fuel won't
Yes.
last very long.
Yeah.
And that is really how we are living, right? We are so much more in the masculine. We're being overproductive. We're over exercising. We've really created this. We feel that it's virtuous to just go, 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 go,
It's
go.
true.
But also our foods are like that. Even our foods, right? Like caffeine, alcohol, low fat foods, no fat foods, super diet foods, extremely raw foods. We are giving up on the good fats very, very easily. But the nourishing foods, the sweet potatoes, the ancient rice, eating with peace, even your exhalation, by the way, your exhalation pumps back fluids into your body. Like, and this is not H2O. H2O doesn't hydrate, but it's like the subtle fluids and the fuel that you need. Because
Wow.
inhale is sympathetic. It exerts your body. It puts you in action mode. And every exhale puts you in repair mode. And that's why at
Mm.
the end of the busy day, we will sit and sigh,
Yes.
right? So as human beings, we've learned, unfortunately, we are doing very, very short inhalations and almost no exhalation.
Yeah.
So we've kind of, so that's another conversation altogether. But long story short, to do this period gracefully is to preserve your fuel. And when you arrive at menopause, brace yourself by understanding and knowing that the body is it's its natural phase and it's depleting, especially when we're having less children, because when we have more children, the body is generating this amniotic fluid and
Interesting.
this breast milk, and it takes a break from its like solarity, that it takes replenishes itself from those fuels. And then that's why our grandmothers, were having menopause much later.
Yes.
So I'm not suggesting you go and have 10 kids if that's not what you're thinking. I myself only have two, but just bracing our body. And Ayurveda has a lot of practices for that. I mean, oiling the body, so oil on the body because the digestive systems are weak, but that starts very early on from your birth, basically. But especially in perimenopause, like oil massage, use like it's self-oiling, even oiling in the nose, oil pulling. We put oil in every single orifice, but there are also other like breath practices, certain foods you eat. And I think
Mm.
more than anything, it is the appreciation that and the reverence for this phase. Because just as the truth is that in our physical 3D bodies, just as we would not want our cells in our body, right? On the other side of our cells' reproductive phases,
Yeah.
when their reproductive function is ending, we would not want them to hang out in our bodies. There would be a slow atrophy of those cells, and then they
Yes.
would be gently evacuated from the body. And the same thing happens to us on the other side of our dating, mating, nesting phase. But women have it really good, right? Because we have a long, big period on the other side. So we can actually find our purpose. We can take more time. You're away from this like dating, mating, nesting game, at least in the same way. Now
Yes.
everything is more real and it's more fulfilling. But then
Yes.
we appreciate that gentle decay. We brace ourselves with that oil. We
Yes.
understand our limitations, and we just have this reverence for this beautiful cycles of nature.
I love it. And so we can actually physically, you're saying moist, like put the oil. And you talked about sesame oil. If somebody can't do that or doesn't have that, what else, what other kind of oils can they use?
Joe, go and buy any body oil. Just you go and buy, as long as it does not have any additives, right? So it could be a mixture of
Clean.
almond and olive and coconut, does not matter. You
Okay.
start with any oil that you find. And I can actually talk about some practices that anybody can do very, very
Please.
easily,
Yes.
right? So I'll tell you the few practices that come top of my mind is use oil on your body before you go into the shower. That also protects you from the water because water can be very harsh on our skin. But massaging your body and that oil, especially if you do it right before your exercise. I know it's slippery, but that's the recommendation. But if you don't do it before exercise, when your body's still hot after exercise, apply that oil on your body and
Okay.
massage it in for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, as long as you want. It's even if it's just 2 minutes. And oil, like our skin, it replenishes the microbiome on our skin because a lot of the
Oh,
microbiome that protects us from diseases is lipophilic, which means it survives on fat. It eats fat to live. So you massage your body with that oil everywhere you can, belly button, arms, legs, head, hair, whatever you want to put it. And then you go into the shower, right? Super easy practice. I keep a simple bottle of Trader Joe's oil, lemongrass coconut oil, and I use that. But you can do more, like oiling your hair once in a while, like twice a week. And again, a practice which feels very grounding, very great for the nervous system, but also goes and restores, replenishes you at every single level. Um, there is an oil practice for the nose called Nasya. I mean, super underrated. You can do it your entire life. My young daughters do it
okay.
now because the mucus the mucus and the microbiome in our entire nasal cavities, their responsibilities that when we inhale any breath, it warms the breath and it kind of filters everything out. But as the microbiome begins to get damaged, it can't do
Yes.
that anymore. The breath has all of these odd patterns. It's one drop of oil, and for this you cannot just use any oil. You either use plain sesame oil or you buy a nasya oil, more available than people think it is. You just type in NASYA, and
Okay.
one drop needs to be inserted into each nostril every single day. There's no limitations on when you can, except for you cannot do it if you're having a drink or you've just had a drink alcohol, because then it can interfere. But otherwise, and your nose skips the blood brain barrier. The only place which has access to the brain without the, because there's no blood-brain barrier, is the nose. So, today scientists are discovering that, oh, there's certain treatments for Alzheimer's and dementia where you could administer drugs through the nose. So this oil actually goes and even prevents Alzheimer's, dementia, all of that, but also replenishes this entire ENT region, enhances the way you breathe, all of that. And then there's certain breathwork practices. If you want to look up alternate nostril breathing, or people want to look up resonance breath, those two very, very replenishing. And I'll just give just two more nighttime practices because they're so
Please.
easy.
Yes.
Is laying on a bed with your legs up against the wall. So you go to the edge of the bed or a couch and you lay, but you put your legs entirely up against. And this practice is called Viparit Karni. It's a yoga pose. And you can
Yes.
just play some music. You don't need food. You shouldn't have food in your stomach. So it should be right at the end of the day. But
Yes.
what it does, it reverses blood flow in a very efficient manner. And it kind of starts repairing you from the burnout created, right? Like people's blood pressure becomes lower, people's anxiety goes away. Everything that's created damage now will start repairing. And then lastly, applying oil in the soles of your feet before you go to bed. So
Nice.
there's tons of other practices, but I feel like these are very easy to start incorporating in your day to day on a daily, just much more easy. But otherwise, oil pulling comes, if you heard of oil pulling comes from Ayurveda. Uh,
Yes.
a lot of these practices today that are modern trendy. Bullet coffee comes from Ayurveda, the idea of bullet coffee. But yeah, just, if you cannot, because our body's digestive abilities get compromised as we age, that
Yes.
doesn't mean your skin is also a channel of consumption. And oiling your body to nourish you and to replenish your fuels and to give you strength and the nervous system and the self-touch and the oxytocin that comes with the self-touch. Oh my God, I cannot stop talking about how amazing this practice is.
Okay. I love this so much, but let's talk about the hair too then. So you had some clients, I don't know if you call them clients or patients in your book.
Clients, yeah, yeah,
Clients. I had a feeling you called the
yeah,
clients.
yeah,
Patients
yeah,
feels more okay.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
and some of them had, you said like male pattern baldness as part of like
yeah,
all the other elements that they were dealing with.
yeah,
When you lose the estrogen and the progesterone and maybe the testosterone's like not being balanced in the same way. I mean, I had a hair expert come on the show like that. He does hair transplants. I mean, that's like
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's not
yeah,
what he was on for. He's that's his study.
yeah,
He's a doctor and he
yeah,
talked to us about
yeah,
it. But I'd love the lens on like because I saw a post you did talking about having like sesame or like
yeah,
even like tahini or halawa,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
I'm just
yeah, yeah,
curious, what can we
yeah.
do if we are, I mean, yes, I'm 54 in perimenopause. I'll get
Look
in the
at you.
shower. Oh, you're sweet. I was a little self-conscious because I was like, okay, I know Nidhi, like you study people and like look at what's
No,
going
no, 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 no,
on.
no, no, no. For everything that I teach, like I think part of this is non-judgment. So don't worry about it
No,
at
no,
all.
I know. I'm partially
Yeah,
teasing, but I was like, oh, I gotta. But
yeah,
yes, the hair's like I never had to just come out. Like it's just going every time I shower. And I'm like, what? I don't want to use like chemicals.
yeah,
Is there a
yeah.
way to truly reverse that, or is that just genetic?
No, you can absolutely slow it down, right, Michelle? And also, it's the phase, if you're saying perimenopause, right? It's a drying phase of life,
Yeah.
right? So it's become so the follicles, they kind of lose their sebum. And that
Yes.
sebum, which is that oil, it's like think of a tree that's drying, like the where it's planted. So when the roots start drying a little bit, when the
Yes.
earth is drying, then
Yes.
it's not planted as firmly.
Yeah.
But so pattern baldness is different. It's completely different. That's usually with a younger, like 25-year-old or a 35-year-old
Oh,
because of high T levels, the androgens are suddenly, and it can happen, but it happens differently. Even if they're of high, it can happen because of high androgens in our 50s as well. But it's the whole the pathology is different. It's slightly bit different. That's more age related decrease in estrogen, rather than because I lived a lifestyle which increased my testosterone. It's not
ah,
that. For
okay.
20s and 30s, it's basically because it's the imbalance you create because of your lifestyle and consumption. And
Okay.
out here, this is this is quite a in a timely fashion because naturally estrogen will decrease as you come to that phase. So, which again, by the way, is a very moist hormone. Estrogen is super moist. Testosterone is hot. Uh, so that being said, sesame seeds like are great for that. And it's not a coincidence that within the Western world, it talks about sesame seeds will help you to rebuild your estrogen. It has all these phytoestrogens, etc. Right?
Interesting.
So seed cycling, one of the seeds in seed
Oh,
cycling is
that's what the whole
sesame
seed.
seeds.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
yeah.
I'd say that's a very good place to start but you don't want to overdo it, especially if your body is very hot. You don't want to overdo the sesame seeds, but like in small amounts, where if you're eating, just some tahini, be a little bit more lean, a little bit more partial towards tahini. If you're eating, for example, let's just say hummus or falafel, and you just add a little condiment, or, I just tell people roasted sesame seeds. Um, Even a spoonful of them with something called jaggery, which is
Yes, what is the
oh,
jaggery? You talked about it's sweet, yes?
it's sweet. It comes from the sugarcane plant. It's basically one step before molasses is jaggery, and then jaggery is converted into
Molasses.
molasses. But you don't have to eat it with jaggery. Even if you just eat the plain sesame seeds, roasted sesame seeds, 1/4 of a teaspoon. But you want to eat it for 3 weeks, and not in a season that's very, very hot. If it's very hot, or if your body has severe inflammation that you're experiencing actively, you want to tone down on that sesame because it can be very heating in the system as well.
Okay.
It's warm and it's very, very moist. But it's warm as well if you do it in large doses. So winter is a great time. I do this every single winter where
You
I get
do.
this sesame balls made with jaggery and sesame, and then I eat one of those every single day. Like I said, they look like energy balls, but they're great. Only sesame and jaggery.
Where can we get
So
those?
you can get them at an Indian grocery store, but I tell people you don't have to be married to a certain type of sesame, right?
Yeah,
That's why I say
okay.
you do.
Yeah.
I thought it was called halwa, but I think you pronounce it differently,
Well, I
halava.
think I think in Egypt they call it halwa or something or halva, and then
Yeah, that's what I mean.
yeah, yeah, and
Yeah,
then halawa is how, but it's
halave.
yeah, so
Yeah,
halawa, yeah, and so it's just the little yeah, the it's delicious with
yeah,
some
yeah,
Syrian
yeah,
bread. Yeah, anyway, but yeah, so
yeah. Basically,
and it
basically,
has
yeah.
some
So
sugar in it. Yeah, it's a little sweet.
yes, it has some sugar in it, yes.
Yeah.
Uh, so basically, something like that is fine too. Or you just start adding more sesame to your foods. And sesame is it's a great sprinkle to add to a lot of food that adds a lot of flavor. It enhances the foods. So, in whichever way you can get it in, that is one simple idea. But I also like the idea of hair oiling, which now has become big in the West, again, in Ayurvedic practice. And it's a beautiful tradition in families. Grandmothers oil the hair of all the children and the mother's hair. So I still oil my girls' hair. Like one night before they're washing their hair, I'll oil their hair and I'll massage the oil into the scalp. I'll
Beautiful.
massage. So it's basically a scalp massage. And then I'll do a little bit of the ends as well. And because they're used to it, they're okay sleeping with it and they wash it off in the morning. But I tell people if it's the first time, then you oil your hair, keep it on for 20 minutes, oil your scalp more than your hair, massage it. Feels so relaxing and you feel sleep so well. It's so grounding. But you start at 20 minutes and do it in the morning, daytime. You don't want to have oil at night and then wash it at night and then sleep with wet hair. You
No.
do it in the morning. And when it starts feeling good and comfortable, you can keep it overnight,
And
even
what
if it's twice a week.
and what oil are you using?
So you get a lot of specialty hair oils these days, but I like to use, I don't like a lot of the specialty hair oils just simply because they have a lot of fake chemicals. But
Yes.
if you can get any Ayurvedic hair oil, right, they have certain specific ingredients like Brahmi, Amla, Bhringraj, Neem, they have these ingredients. But if you don't get an Ayurvedic hair oil, just sesame oil is fine.
Okay, and sesame oil. Okay. So first of all, Nidhi, when I look at you, I'm like, you're so radiant and gorgeous. So like whatever you're saying, I want to do it. And I thought you were 30, but then I'm reading your bio and I'm like, she can't have this many years of experience if she's 30. So
I'm 43.
you're 43. You're absolutely
Yes,
stunning and you have the most gorgeous hair. So I
thank you.
wonder if part of it is genetic. So if it was male pattern baldness, though, can this still help or is there a different treatment?
I think for the male pattern baldness, you want to first fix the cause, which means that, the high testosterone, which a lot of people are doing excessive amounts of protein. Look, I know this is a trend in the US, like first we said, let's all eat plants, like lots and lots of plants. And then we said, let's drink lots of water. And then now we're saying eat lots of protein. And they're all
Right.
good, right? The plants are good, some amount of water is good, some amount of protein is good, but not in the way that we're going gung ho, right? I mean, if you go look back when sugar first came out, or sugar was being marketed as a weight loss product, so we were as crazy about sugar for weight loss, as well, right? Or
Crazy.
tapeworms for weight loss,
Yes.
or like heroin, literally like a drug for a baby's toothache, right? Cocaine tooth drops. So, I mean, like this is so we change what we say all the time. So, yeah,
Always.
and
Yes.
I know some people get very upset when I say that, hey, if you want to eat proteins are supposed to be like built into our foods naturally. And if you
Yes.
notice that if you know, look at all the traditional cultures, they understood that proteins were very hard to break down. And they actually
Yes.
leave a lot of toxic waste and free radicals in our body. And men tend to digest protein better. Unfortunately, that's just the part. And for men, that's your protein and testosterone levels are very linked. Um, but women, when we overdo the isolate proteins, I think that really gives rise to testosterone. But if you look at traditional recipes, right, whether you look at a spiced falafel, whether you look at a lentil soup, whether you look at fermented miso, they're all supported with something warm and moist, which means spices are warm, they're cooked. Firstly, that's warm right there, but they're also always eaten with some good fat. Fermentation, by the whole process of fermentation is also warm and moist. So
Yes.
miso, right, because fermentation kind of actually creates multiplication of bacteria, and that's a warm process. It's so much you can actually feel the heat if you're on the pot that you're fermenting something. Plus, it's
Yes.
aerobic, so you'll see little water droplets if you're fermenting something. So it's a warm and moist process, and that helps the breakdown. It's a probiotic process. So yeah, we ate our proteins very well cooked, very well spiced, with good fats, whether it's olive oil or ghee. And we want to go back to eating proteins like that a little bit. And a lot of times when I meet women who are suffering from these, I notice that they're doing a lot of supplements and a lot of. So first, you want to change the cause of the condition, and
Yes.
then all of this will help. And then the sesame seeds can help, and then the sesame oil can help, and then everything else can help in a very beautiful way. But first, you want to eliminate the cause.
Yeah, and I think it's an important message because I think you're right. Women are eating chicken for breakfast, lunch, and dinner to get their 120 grams a day because they're told that's what they need to do, but they may not even be building muscle. And so it's just probably creating, what would it be, a catabolic state? I don't know. Or
Yeah, I mean,
anabolic?
toxic, right?
A
Yeah,
toxic
and
state.
it's toxic because it leaves this lot of toxic residue. Like when we worked, as students, when we worked in our labs, we realized that every metabolic process leaves waste, right? And when it's natural foods in the metabolic process, like your body knows kind of what to do with it. Plus, spices are antioxidants. Today, when the whole world has gone crazy with like free radicals, which are all these like low, loose hanging toxic beasts in our system, like these molecules, they can be neutralized through antioxidants. And guess what? Spices
Wow.
are the number one antioxidants. So we knew to spice our foods. We knew how to use the ginger and the ginger powder and the cloves and all of that. They're all antioxidants. They're all anti-inflammatory. So we knew like the detox was built in the foods. So all I'm saying is you want to get back to eating like our ancestors did.
So
And I
good.
think that changes. Also, not eating according to the circadian rhythm can also lead to all this, meal, which is usually associated with PCOS, PCOD. That can happen as well. So we just go back to our rhythms. We eat warm and moist. We eat like our ancestors did, and we'll be fine.
Yes. You talk about rituals over routines. I love the word ritual. Is there one that you can share with my audience today that they can incorporate into their daily routines? Well,
So the
their daily
massage
habits.
is already number one,
Okay,
and
yes.
the alternate nostril breathing, my two favorite rituals. But
Yes.
I'm going to give you a third one as well. I'm going to do the a third one, and this will be counted as my ritual that I want to give. Um, and that ritual is this, right? Is take some time out every day, religiously, to get a cup of warm tea and play some music. Hold the cup with both your hands. Get all your senses engaged and take a sip at a time and have that full experience. And the reason why this is such a big practice, even though it sounds like, what is it going to do for my body? It's not, let me look at the calories on this, let me look at the nutrients on this. It's none of that, right? But it allows you to become really present and become really present for yourself. So we're already talking about being present in our generation, being present for others, being present for your work. And when you allow yourself to be so present for yourself, you unlock a different type of cellular intelligence. And you come back closer to your nature. So if I have to give one ritual beyond my Abhyanga and the Anulom Vilom, which by the way also bring you to the same state, would be to do this and to take time out. And Michelle, it's so difficult for women to do this. You're
Yeah.
like, oh, that's so easy. I can do this. But it's so transforming. You know how when people start journaling, they're like, oh my God, journalizing is helping me so much. This practice is as powerful, if not more.
I love it. And Nidhi, why can't we have our chai? You said that's an indulgence for you. I drink chai so often. What's wrong with chai?
So firstly, I think everybody can drink everything. So I mean it, right? So I
Yes,
till
have your
about six
coffee,
months
have
ago,
your yeah.
yeah. But we just want to know what its properties are. So
Yes.
so tell me, not the temperature, but do you think that chai is and just intuitively, right? I know that
Yeah,
we've
it's
not
hot. It's
talked about
hot. It's all
it's hot,
the
it's
spices
heating,
that
it's
are in it. It's heating.
stimulating.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and like even if you didn't put any spices, just black tea, right? Black
Yeah,
tea is
which I'm having
dehydrating.
right now. Yes, I
Yeah,
have it
black tea
every
is
day. Yeah.
it's a dehydrating, right? So which means it's hot and dry. The word dehydrating is
Mm,
hot and dry.
yeah.
So it's not really warm and moist. It's very solar. That's why it keeps you focused. That's why it keeps you engaged. That's why it keeps you like so sharp, right? But we also it depletes your fuel because it's so
Interesting.
solar. And people who are already very solar. So all I say is still keep it what you love, keep what you love. But add a little milk to it.
I
Instead of
do.
black coffee, drink cappuccino.
Yeah.
People bullet their coffee nowadays, which they put good fat. So they
Yeah.
add something that's like more cool and moist to
I
it.
see.
People put cardamom pods somewhere, many places of the world, they use cardamom in their caffeine. So you put cardamom, which is a cooling spice, by the way. So you brace,
Interesting.
right? That's why, by the way, wine and cheese are paired together, right? Because wine is super hot and corrosive and dry,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And cheese is super dense. So wine by itself will suck into your mucosal lining, right? Because it's so hot, it'll suck. And cheese by itself is just going to become stringy and be stuck in your channels.
Okay.
But so the wine will eat up the cheese, and the cheese basically will not get stuck because it's kind of being broken down by the wine.
Okay. I think it makes sense. I could literally talk to you all day long. I find you fascinating. I love your work. I want everyone to get the book. I'm going to end with two fun questions.
Okay.
As an Ayurveda doctor, I would never.
I would never go for a shower right after eating my food.
Okay, I read that one in your book, and they can read that and understand why. And as an Ayurveda doctor, I always.
Remember that repair is more important than action.
Okay.
Like
Re
rather than getting to something, you continue to just repair. Like repair first and then act.
Okay, beautiful. All right. So everyone needs to go and get your book. I'm so excited for you. And when is it out in the world?
March 11th, 2025, in uh, most parts of the world. If you're based out of India or that subcontinent, that's in April, mid-April.
Okay, I'm so excited for you and for everyone to read this book. The book is called Your Body Already Knows. I want you to all pick up a copy when it's out, and this will air close to the launch date of your book. And if people want to learn more
Amazing.
about you, where should I direct them? Where's the best place?
So simply, my website is super simple, nidhi.me, just like me, very easy to remember. And I have an Instagram channel where I just post regularly, and that is my underscore Ayurvedic underscore life.
Yes. And the beauty is that on their podcast players, I'm going to have all the links so they can find you super easy and the book as well. I've
Thank you so
loved
much.
being with you. You are so
Me too.
radiant.
Thank you.
And now I want to do everything you're doing.
Thank
so,
you so much.
so
Yeah.
thank you for the work you're doing and thank you for your time
Thank
today.
you. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Nidhi.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. No,